Hello everyone and welcome to another casual review. Today I'm talking about Persona 5 Royal. To say this game gets a lot of praise is quite the understatement because in the gaming community this game is quite coveted. So it's been on my to play list for a really long time, and over Black Friday I saw the physical game for only $25 and I decided it is finally time I give this game a chance. Now the reason I typically don't gravitate towards games like this is mostly the amount of time required to actually beat this game. How long to beat.com says that the Persona 5 Royal version takes over 100 hours to beat on average, and typically the most I like to spend on a game is maybe 15 to 20 hours. The reason for that is because in my mind the best part about video games is the beginning and the end, when you get rewarded for all your hard work. The more time that you put in between the beginning and the end, the more my interest starts to wane. But all I see online is just how amazing Persona 5 Royal is, and so when I saw this game for 25 bucks on Black Friday, I decided it was finally time I give this game a chance. So I did a lot of preparation work ahead of time, mostly as far as videos go. I played a bunch of those short Shovel Knight games in order to pad out the weeks going along, because I wouldn't be able to play this game in under a week. I also lined it up just perfectly over Christmas break, and the idea was that I would just play this game all Christmas break, and then at the end of Christmas break I'd be able to finish it and record a casual review. Fortunately, I did receive a PlayStation 5, which kind of put a kink in that plan, but normally I don't like to play two games simultaneously, but I made an exception here because I was so excited to play through some of the PlayStation 5 games that I got. But also Persona 5 Royal, I had put about 60 hours into the game at this point, and so I might have had a little bit of a sunk cost fallacy where I felt like I needed to continue playing Persona 5 so I don't forget what I'm doing or how to play the game or things like that, which is another reason why I typically don't like to play long games like this, is I don't like to get locked in that one game for such a long amount of time. But in the end, this all turned out just fine, and I'm glad I have had played Persona 5 Royal. So let's get into it. Persona 5 Royal is a very stylish anime game where I don't even know where to begin with this game because there's not really anything else like it. As far as genre goes, I would put it mostly in the turn-based JRPG category with some light stealth elements, but then the other side of this game is also like a social simulator, is that what we call them? Where you get to build up all these relationships with people and date them and give them presents, and you have to decide how you want to spend your time on a day-to-day normal life alongside this fantastical Persona side of the JRPG side of the game. So as far as the JRPG side of the game goes, it's kind of like I guess almost like a Pokemon kind of game where you are collecting these things called personas. They don't really take so much of a front seat as Pokemon do, where they're kind of more like almost more like Blades in Xenoblade Chronicles 2, where they're kind of like your spirit, and all they do is basically like unlock different abilities for you to use in combat. The main humans themselves kind of take the front row here, whereas the personas are behind them, kind of giving them the powers that they need. But the idea is that there is an alternate reality in this world called the metaverse, and the metaverse is like a reflection of people's cognitive thoughts and feelings. People with really distorted cognitions start to develop their own little building areas in this metaverse called palaces. And so the idea is that our main character eventually gets a group of other people along with them, and they become the Phantom Thieves. And in order to change this twisted person's thoughts and feelings and actions, they have to steal the treasure from this person's palace. I like the variety of themes as far as the palaces go, because the palaces kind of reflect the person's cognition. And so if you, for instance, the first person that the Phantom Thieves target is a gym teacher, and he kind of thinks of the school as his own castle, and he's like the king of the castle. And so the theme of this palace is a castle, and he's kind of like a king. Other places you go to is like an Egyptian tomb, or almost like a space future futuristic kind of area. It was nice to have that kind of unique variety in terms of the themes that you play through. Once a treasure has been stolen from the palace, then the person kind of almost starts feeling really guilty for all of the actions that they've done up to this point, and it kind of forces them to confess to all of their crimes and wrongdoings. I like how it plays on the morality of whether the Phantom Thieves are just or not. That's a big theme, a big cornerstone of the discussion that everyone's talking about, is like, is it morally just for them to force these twisted people to have a change of heart? Is that okay to do? These palaces are filled with bad enemies called shadows, and the shadows are where the turn-based combat mostly takes place. So there's a lot of different elemental abilities in this game, electric, fire, nuke, psychic, all of these things, and the shadows tend to have at least one or two weaknesses depending on like what kind of element you're using. When you use the weakness against this shadow, then they are almost like downed, like stunned, and if you're able to get all of the enemy shadows down during a turn, a combat, then you are able to do a couple different actions. You can just go all out on these guys, and all of your teammates do this big, huge attack on the shadows, and it does a ton of damage. I do wish that the all-out attacks kind of varied from point to point, because near the end of the game, once you're 80, 90 hours into this game, seeing the same all-out attack over and over again gets pretty repetitive. The other thing you can do is you can either get this shadow to give you items or money, or you can potentially recruit them to your team and these shadows become your persona. In order to successfully recruit them, they start saying some really weird, nonsensical things, and depending on their behaviorisms, you need to respond accordingly. So a shadow with a timid personality, you may need to respond very calm and encouragingly, compared to someone who's gloomy, where you need to respond pretty vague. But if you do respond correctly, then they do become your own persona, and you do gain access to their abilities. The personas themselves, as far as the design goes, they're actually pretty weird. They're not like cutesy mascots like Pokemon. A lot of them are pretty like demon-like, or very like twisted, snake-like. Some of them represent like deities of other religions, but they actually get pretty weird. Like there's like a demon sitting on a toilet looking really bored. There's almost like a genitalia monster, so they can get pretty twisted. Now, a huge aspect about collecting all of these personas is you are able to sacrifice two personas together and almost like fuse them into a brand new persona, almost like breeding would go in Pokemon, where the new persona can inherit certain abilities and skills from the previous two personas that you sacrifice. And there's like hundreds of different personas, and so if you want to collect them all, then you're going to be fusing a ton of these personas together. It's a cool system in that like you're almost building up as you are slowly fusing all these personas together. By the end of the game, you have this like culmination of these really strong personas that have inherited all of these really powerful abilities that you like. And so the main character is the only one that can hold multiple personas and do this fusing thing. Your teammates all have their own singular persona that are tied to them forever, but by the end of the game, I liked to have a ton of different personas, so then I have a ton of different elemental attacks, so then I can potentially defeat any shadow that I come across as long as they have a weakness. The whole fusing personas and sacrificing personas system goes a lot deeper than that. You can just, rather than fusing two personas together, you can just sacrifice one persona and boost up a different persona. You can also, almost like a daycare system, you can put one persona in a jail cell to get powered up and learn different abilities. It goes fairly deep. It's a pretty complex system, and even I don't feel like I completely understand it all even after beating the game, but it is a really cool system to experiment and play around with. I spent a lot of time just customizing my personas and fusing them all together to build the most powerful ones. So once you're all boosted up and ready with all your personas, then you are invading these palaces, you're defeating these shadows, you're looting treasure, because you're a phantom thief, right? And so when you go into the metaverse, you and your teammates are all decked out in these flashy outfits, and it's stylish, and you're getting all this loot and treasure, and then you are finding these safe rooms where you can save and heal up. The thing about invading a palace is that once you're in a palace, there's not like any, aside from items, there's not any way to heal up your SP. In this case, you use SP to use your abilities. And so really, once your SP has run out, and you don't have any items to boost up your SP, you kind of have to leave the palace for the day, which can be a problem because in order to effectively use your time wisely, you probably want to do a whole palace in one sitting. The reason for that is as this game goes along, you move through these days and there are certain deadlines that you need to invade these palaces. If you don't invade the palaces within the certain amount of days that you have required, then it says that it's game over. Now, I always had plenty of time to invade these palaces. I never felt really stressed out as far as not being able to meet that deadline, and I don't really know what game over would look like. Does that just mean that it takes you to the previous save, or does that mean that you have to start the game over? It's probably not something so drastic as that, but it is probably just it's just something to give you a little push and encouragement to actually invade the palaces to meet those deadlines, so you're not just wasting your time that way. Now, when I say time management, I'm not necessarily talking about like real life time, like an hour playing the game isn't an hour spent in the game itself. When I say time, I mean more like actions, because every day you have about two actions that you can do after school. How you decide you want to spend those actions is up to you. Now, invading a palace takes one of those actions, and that's why I say it's probably in your best interest, if you are ready to actually invade a palace and steal the treasure inside, to do it all in one day, so then you don't use two actions, you only use one. So you may be asking, okay, well, what do I do with those other actions that I have available? This is where the social simulator comes into play, where you can build up your relationships. And I heavily recommend that you spend a lot of your time building up those relationships, because as you build up relationships with the people around you in the real world, you gain certain abilities and passive boosts in the metaverse. And some of these are really cool and really strong. And if you are building a relationship with one of your teammates that goes into the metaverse with you, one of the phantom thieves, then it also boosts up their powers as well. Another good benefit of boosting up these relationships is when you are fusing personas together, it boosts up their levels too, depending on like what kind of arcana they have. It's a problem for me to feel like I'm never really managing my actions and my time correctly in this game, much like real life now that I think about it. So after school, you'll get a bunch of text messages from some of your friends and buddies, and they'll say, hey, do you want to hang out today? And you kind of have to decide like which person you want to hang out with, which person do you want to build up that relationship with. You can also decide, okay, now's the time that I go invade a palace if I need to. But there are also certain actions that you can do in order to boost up your social skills as well. So there's different social skills like your intelligence, your proficiency, your guts, or in order to do certain tasks for people, then you need to meet certain skill requirements as well. Now, I would certainly focus on building up your relationships first, and if there's no relationships that you can build up during that time, that's when you build up these social skills, because I felt like these social skills kind of build themselves up anyway as you are spending time with people, and I was maxed out on all of my social skills way before the end of the game. Now, another thing that you can choose to spend an action on is exploring the mementos, and the mementos are like a collective cognition of just the general public. Remember how I said that your ambitions and your cognition needs to be really twisted in order to develop a palace? Well, what about all the other people that just have more minor problems and different cognitions, right? That's just a collective cognition, almost portrayed as like an underground subway. And the mementos is a great place to go into in order to collect any personas that you haven't been able to yet, grind up XP, get some items, but there are also little almost like sub quests that you can do in order to gain different benefits and boost up the Phantom Thief's popularity. So every once in a while you'll get a text message from one of these guys and they'll say, hey, I collected another sub-quest for you to go do in the Mementos, and you can choose to spend an action to go into the Mementos. Now, the Mementos themselves can feel quite tedious and grindy, but they are required to play all the way through in order to completely beat the game. So I would recommend going to the Mementos every once in a while in order to just kind of like stay on top of it. So when it does get to the end of the game where you do need to actually complete the Mementos, you don't have a ton of grinding to do. Now, remember how I said building up relationships unlocks really cool skills and abilities? There is one that you can acquire where it just makes, if the enemies are like a way lower level than you, then it's just an auto defeat battle. And this made the Mementos a lot easier to go through because it just automatically defeated those enemies. And I felt like by the end of the game, I was a really high level, higher level than I probably should have been. Not because I was grinding a ton, but just because I equipped this item that you start out with at the beginning of the game. Probably comes with the Persona 5 Royale version of this game, where it boosts the XP that you get by 15%. And whenever it came to being able to boost up my XP, I've learned in RPGs that's something that I really want to go for. And so I would equip those items. And then also in the Mementos, you can collect these items, almost like these tokens, and you can trade them in. And I traded them in for bonus XP in the Mementos as well. So by the end of the game, I think I was level 96 and the cap was level 100. So I was probably way over leveled, but I actually kind of prefer it that way, especially because it unlocks more potential for using this auto battle system, which made the Mementos a lot more manageable. I really like how this game starts and that it shows you a clip from about 60 hours into this game. And at the point, it's kind of acting like a tutorial to teach you how to play Persona, but you really have like no idea what's going on story-wise, who all these people are that are talking. And then once you reach about 60 hours into the game, you actually are playing through that game in real time. So the idea is most of the game you are in an interrogation room because you do get caught at the very beginning of the game and you're talking to your interrogator, kind of recalling the events that led up to this time. And once you finally reach up to that time and you are replaying through the scene again, you kind of understand like everything that's going on. And you're like, oh, so that's that person. And oh, okay, I know what's going on here. And so it was really cool the way that they did that. Now, this isn't the first time that I've seen something like this in video games or in movies, but because of the amount of time that it took to lead up to that event, I almost like forgot about the beginning of the game. And so once I was replaying through that, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this at the beginning of the game because so much time had passed between the beginning of the game and when I actually worked my way back up to that point. I have to be honest though, the pacing of this game really didn't do it for me. There are huge chunks of the game where all you're doing is you're talking to people, you're trying to respond the best way that you think that they might like to hear, you're trying to decide how to spend your time, and it's just so much talking. It can get rather wordy at times, and other times you're just invading a palace or the Mementos, and it just feels like you're doing that part for such a long time. Now, if you wanted to, you could kind of break up the social simmy part and the JRPG part if you wanted to, but it wouldn't be as efficient because you'd be wasting a lot of actions that way. And so pacing wise, it just feels like I'm doing this social simulator almost like a visual novel for 2 hours, and then I'm doing a palace for 5 hours, and then I'm back to the social sim for 2 more hours. And so I wish there was a better way to kind of like break up both of the two, because I did like both aspects of the game. Probably not so much the social simulator kind of aspects, maybe a little less of those and a little more of the JRPG kind of actual combat system, but I did like both. I just didn't like having to split them up so far in between, so it felt like that was like all I was doing at the time. Now, as far as what the Royale version of this game brings to the table, it's almost like a Game of the Year kind of version where it includes all of the additional DLC. And after you beat the main game, there's like an additional palace that you get to play through, which I actually felt really ruined the pacing of this game, because at the end of the game, you fight against the big bad. I don't want to spoil too much here, but you do fight against this big, huge, godlike guy, and then it's the end, and it almost feels like everything has come to a close, but then it's like, but wait, there's one more palace you got to play through, and it just kind of hindered the pacing of the story to me, because I felt like we already kind of hit this big climax, and then we're doing this one additional palace. Also, I guess if I am being entirely honest, I was pretty ready to be finished with this game, and so to just tack on this additional palace kind of felt a little too much in my opinion. But after having beat it all, I do appreciate this final palace, and I do see its relevance to the story and the world. I just wish that they had been able to kind of tack this on before the big godlike battle at the end of the main game. In addition to this, it also gives you like different costumes that you can put on your character. So I was playing this mostly during Christmas break. I gave my characters all Christmas outfits, and it gives you those additional items like the bonus experience that I was told you about earlier. And I'm sure there's some quality of life features too. I'd never really played the original Persona 5, just this Persona 5 Royale, but I could kind of tell what stuff was added to it in this version of the game. The music's really good, as you can imagine the Phantom Thieves would have. It's very jazzy and stylish, and the whole UI of this game too is very cool in terms of like the graphics, and whenever you defeat an enemy, you get this like cool red ribbon that zigzags around, and big ol' explosives on like how much XP and money you got. So it's a very unique, flashy, stylish, jazzy kind of aesthetic. But as far as the like actual in-game models themselves, I'm not crazy about the 3D in-game models. I didn't really think that they looked very good. A little dated, but maybe that's just because of when this game came out. They looked exactly like the models of Catherine Full Body, which makes sense because these two games were made by the same people. I do like that when you hit certain key points in the story, then you get little anime cutscenes, which were really cool. Seeing all these 3D characters in anime version was fun. Overall, I'm really glad that I played this game, and I did really enjoy it. It had a lot going for it, and it is certainly unique, to say the least. But it is a really long game, and that's typically not something that I enjoy. At the end, my save file said that it took me 88 hours to beat this Persona 5 Royale game, and actually, according to howlongtobeat.com, that is a very quick time to be playing through this game. And I know, there's like a ton more that I could potentially do. There's a whole new game plus option that you can play through, and I could have spent more time in the mementos. I could have collected all of their personas, and so if you're the type of person that like this is your deserted island game, like, more power to you. I'm glad that you enjoy playing this game so much. 88 hours for me though was a tad too long. Overall, I think I will give this game a 4 out of 5. I think the experience will stay with me for a long time. I just don't see myself playing this game again for a while. Well guys, that's it for me. Let me know if you have any questions or comments about Persona 5 Royale, and I'd love to hear what you have to say. If you played this game before, I'm sure that you do have a lot to say. So please tell me your perspective on the game. Is it too long? Did you enjoy it? That's it for me though. I'll talk to you later. Bye!